Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we are going to experiment with some stamps and some paper, and I'm using some of the stamps I designed from Rubber Stamp Tapestry. You can find them online at pegstamps.com and check out the coupon code in the video description so you can save a little bit on your order. And what I'm going to try to do today, now I'm in the planning stage, I'm going to let you see behind the scenes here how I planned it out. I want to make use of some black and white papers, like that are mostly white, because these are the things that always just kind of sit around in a paper stack and don't get used because I'm always drawn to the color. And I have chose some stamps that are kind of solid, so I think they'll give me a nice contrast. And what we're going to do is a stamped resist. So I want to do some watercolor effects on these papers, so I'm going to need to have to make them a lot sturdier. So I'm going to be gluing them to some recycled cardboard from my recycling bin. So I have 3 different pieces of cardboard here, just, you know, granola bar boxes, cut down to 4.5 by 3.25, so it's 1 inch smaller than a regular A2 card. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of trace some of this paper, or at least get an idea of where I want to use the paper, and I'm going to cut it out kind of roughly with scissors. Now, you can take your time and get more use out of your paper, obviously. Please do that. But I thought these frames were kind of fun. So then after you get your paper cut out, what you're going to do, and I'm just going to move my paper here. I'll show you on one and I'll do the other 2 on my own time, so you don't have to sit around and watch that. I'm going to give it a generous coat of glue stick, and this is an Avery glue stick. I really like this. I typically don't use glue sticks that much, but if I do have to use a glue stick, I like the Avery ones because they do seem to do a better job at gluing stuff and having it not like pop apart later on. So I'm just kind of like holding this out because I can kind of see, if I look up to the light, I can kind of line it up a little bit and make sure my frame is fairly square. And then after I have that there, have that centered up the way I want it, I'm just going to cut the corners off on the back. You don't have to be too fancy here. You're not going to see the back, so it really doesn't matter how it looks. And then I am going to fold over the edges and smooth them down with a bone folder. And then we'll just glue that to the back. See how cutting the corners makes it really nice and neat? And just make sure you fold that up nice and tight, especially if you don't have a lot of space like on that edge there. And now we've got a nice finished front there, and we're gonna have a lot of sturdiness to this, so hopefully this won't buckle when we go ahead and use our watercolor. So don't be stingy with the glue. You want to make sure that you do get glue on everything. And if you don't have a bone folder, you can use like you could use the back of a plastic spoon or just anything like that, a plastic ruler, something where you can really just get a nice crisp fold and you can really press that fabric, or paper rather, down. So I'm going to do this with the other papers that I have. Obviously on these I'll just go right from the edge. I'm not going to cut right out into the middle. That had a frame that I wanted to use, so that's why I did that. So when we come back, that will be done. Okay, so here are our 3 cardboard pieces all covered. Make sure that after you do it, go over it with a bone folder like this. That's going to squeeze out any air bubbles. It'll smush down the glue really well, and make sure you have a good bond. The other thing I want to make sure that you don't forget is to use baby powder, cornstarch, talc, anything you have like that to dust over your paper. And that's mainly because it's a good idea before we're going to heat emboss, but also since you have used glue stick, there could be some moisture in the paper from that, and that's just going to kind of wick it away so that your embossing powder doesn't cling where you don't want it to. So what I'm going to do is actually stamp on each of these. Now this one I have to be a little careful with because I have that frame, so I was thinking that might be kind of cool inside that frame, and you need to use some embossing ink, and I want to use clear because even though the frame, there's not going to be much showing behind this, on the other papers I want to be able to see that pattern through underneath the stamping, because I think that's going to give me a really interesting layer. So I'm just going to center that one up there and make sure you get a good, you give time for the ink to transfer. All right, hopefully I've got that. Looks like I have it. I can see a little bit of a watermark there. And then we're going to use clear detail embossing powder. And detail powder is just embossing powder that's been ground nice and fine. So like you have really thick embossing powder when you want to do really thick effects, and these are for when you want really fine effects. Since there are little branches here, I want to make sure that I'm going to be able to see that detail when I go to ink over them. Alright, make sure you don't overheat it, because if you overheat it, it'll take the shine away and then we won't get that nice resist. Now that I'm looking at this, it is kind of plain, so I think I'm going to do a couple of the birds. So I have some different silhouette birds here, and I like to have ones that are going in different directions. I think I'm going to do this one here. Oh, and you don't want to drop your ink pad on the other paper, because then you'll end up with ink where you don't want it. So I think I'll just put one bird on this one, and then I'll heat emboss that. Now I'm going to repeat this on the other two panels. I also grabbed these trees here. Hopefully that stamp's nice and clean. It looks a little stained, but I think it's just stained from ink. So if not, I'll leave a little bit of a ghost of color behind, but I'm not going to worry about it. And I should be able to do the birds while that's still, before I emboss that. If you want to work a little slower, then you can emboss as you go. Let's swoop a couple of these birds in there. And if you're not sure, just kind of tip it to the light, and you can usually see where your embossing is. And then just repeat that step, and then do the tree of your choosing on the other one. Okay, I have my 3 images heat embossed on my white scrapbook paper that has been glued to cardboard. Now, keep in mind, this is not watercolor paper, so working with watercolor mediums are going to be a little bit trickier, so we're going to employ some different tactics. I have distress ink cubes, I have watercolor markers, and I have Brusho, which are the pigment powders that kind of burst when they hit your papers. And I'll list all the stuff down below, and you can use whatever brands you have. It doesn't have to be these brands. Any dye-based ink, any water-based markers, any pigment powder stuff is going to be fine for this. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to try the inks, and I'm just going to move these papers out of the way so I don't get them messy by mistake. I'm working on a foam stamping pad because I figure I can rinse this off when I'm done if it gets some ink on there and I don't expect it. So what I'm going to do first here is take my my clear block, and I am going to ink it up with my ink pad. If you can see that there, I'm going to put some yellow there. I'm going to do some blue on one side and some pink on the other. And these colors came together with like a bright orange in a little kit. And they weren't very expensive. So now that I've got that done, I am going to hit this with some water to help the colors blend and get watercolory, because the colors are not going to blend and spread on this paper. They're going to want to kind of be stuck, and I'm just going to flop it over there and smush it on. Alright, now I can see I want darker colors because I'm not getting enough contrast there. So I'm going to ink this up again and smash it down again. Wipe off the extra. I'm just gonna, I might not even wet this. I'm gonna see what I can do if I just go in there dry with it. Get a couple little bits of pink there, maybe a little pink over there by the blue to give it purple. And let's see what happens if I just go right on there with the color. It's not moving, so I do need to spray it. Now we're not going to be able to see the true color until it dries, because as the paper is wet, it's looking transparent, and we're seeing the brown underneath from the card that we glued it to, that cardboard. I'm actually going to go right in with the ink pad and put a little bit directly right on the tree. I'm not worried about cross-contaminating here, because I think that the ink is only going to go onto the paper. I don't think it's going to soak up any ink that I've already put down. And I'm going to go ahead and throw in a little bit more yellow. So we're going to have to let this dry, and then we'll be able to go and see what we actually have. I don't really want to have any harsh ink on the edges, so that's the only thing I'm trying to avoid. But I might just go ahead and just do a little bit of smushing there to put that on the edges. So experiment number 1 is just about ready to dry. For experiment number 2, we're going to use water-based markers. So what I first want you to do to kind of get the paper a little bit more responsive to blending is just to spritz it with some water. Do not expect the same type of blending that you would get on watercolor paper or Bristol with this. It's not going to happen. But by spritzing it, you can help the colors not be so hard edged. So that's another thing, you know, just another way to use your supplies. I'm overlapping some of the yellow with the blue. Now I am using a brush tip marker, so the nice thing about this is that I can go over with another color and it's not going to contaminate my marker. And I might end up having to go over areas a couple times to make it dark enough. And I'm just, again, keeping with the primary colors. Now you could do any colors you want. It's obviously up to you, but I wanted to kind of compare these techniques apples to apples. So in order to do that, I am using the same colors. And I thought it'd be kind of fun. Just a kind of a tie-dyed type sunset colors here would be kind of interesting to work with. And I just want to make sure I have enough dark color behind the trees so that they will stand out. So that's why I'm going to go in with the blue here, and I'll end up with some purple and some shadow colors. And again, we will have to let this dry to get to see what our colors really are, because when our paper's wet, it's transparent and we're seeing that brown cardstock or cardboard underneath. So we just need to have a little patience there while that dries. If you want to soften things further, you can give it a little spritz of water. Don't be worried if your cardboard buckles a little bit. You can kind of bend it back and it should be fine. So we're going to set that aside to dry, and then we're going to go on to our third example, or our third experiment, which will be using Brusho. So this was, I did a bigger tree here on this from the Woodland Harvest set here. I had room for that on here, and I thought that would be really fun for such a wild technique like Brusho. So I am going to hit that pretty well with my sprayer. I like to do yellow first when I'm doing Brusho because I'm really heavy-handed with this. I'm trying to get better at not being so heavy-handed with the Brusho. And you always see more when you respray it, so I just want to make sure I'm not getting in over my head too much. And then I'm just going to maybe tip stuff around a little bit. I might use my water brush just to kind of fill in some of the branches here. Don't worry, it's just puddling right now, but I think it'll be fine. I'm going to dab out some of the puddles and re-sprinkle. You can see how it's easy to get over, get too much color. And we'll do a little bit more of the yellow. I'm going to give it another spritz. And honestly, I think I kind of just want to let it, dry, and then I can wipe off any pigment that's on top of the tree branches. Can blot a little bit. We do have way more than we need for water there. But you can see how it does resist the embossing powder, or the embossing powder resists the Brusho, and I think we're going to end up with a cool design when this dries, and it's going to be a lot brighter in color too, because when it dries, we shouldn't see the cardboard color through the paper. So we're going to let all this stuff dry, and then we're going to come back and turn these into cards. So these are all dry. I didn't do anything to speed up the drying process. I just left them be, and I like the way this came out. Now I can wet a napkin here, and I can remove any leftover ink on top of the embossing if I want to. I think that came out pretty well. I like the way this came out too. That's nice and bright. I wasn't that thrilled with this, so I think I am going to end up adding some of the little distress ink cubes on this, because it just didn't get as dark as I wanted. But I think I can just kind of go over with the distress ink here and be able to pump up that the color around the embossing enough so that I can get a good contrast there, because that's what it was kind of missing, was just a little bit of that contrast. And I could probably even go in a little bit with my markers a little bit and kind of fade that out. So I mean, you're definitely going to have limitations when you're using the the scrapbook paper versus watercolor paper, but you can, you can use up a supply that you might not have other use for there. I like that a little bit better because I can get a little bit of contrast there. And I'm happy with this, so now it's time to turn these into some cards. So I got to looking at the panels that I was working on, and I thought I wanted like a little bit of a framing to them because I'm going to mount these on white cardstock. I'm going to do a fairly simple treatment, so I'm just using these ink pads. These are very old, but I like that they had a nice foam pad and just the denseness of them. I have a really easy time inking with these versus like sponges sometimes, so I thought I would just grab these. You can of course use your color dusters or your sponge daubers, whatever you want to use if you want to do this. Now the other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to do some embellishing with wire. So a lot of people don't know this, but on the side of your crocodile there's actually these depth gauges, and you can set these so that you can adjust how far your punch will go. The hole will go. So I have this one set here at about 1/4 of an inch. And then what I do to make my holes evenly spaced, I'm going to punch about 1/4 inch from the edge here. Then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Then I'm going to try to do it right in the center. And then I'll go in the middle between each of those holes, and that helps me line stuff up. And since I had the little guide placement set, all the holes are the same distance from the side of the of my like cardboard here, so it just makes it really easy to line stuff up. I am going to use some little eyelets that I've had forever. These are, I don't know how old they are. They're quite old. They were secondhand to me because I had another mom in the twins group that I'm a member of was a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator probably about 10 years ago, and she was getting rid of a bunch of stuff, and she asked me if I wanted these, and I love eyelets. I use them all the time. I think they're just kind of classic, so I know some people are going to cringe because they're going to be so over the eyelets, but I like them. You can have them kind of go straight, you can have them go like diamonds, you can have them go every which way, but I think I'm going to have mine go like a diamond, and I'm going to try to line them all up so they all go the same way. And then I'm just going to set these with my crocodile here. These are actually nice and soft, they set really easily. Alright, and if they do get a little bit out of sync, you can kind of try moving them with your fingernails, but I'm not going to worry about that too much. Now, I have a lot of different artistic wires. I think they're really fun and beautiful, and I had picked up a bunch of these quite a few years ago. I had a problem, and I can't say that I'm completely cured, but if I find a good deal on like a craft consumable, I tend to like go a little overboard, and they had these packs of 12 spools of wire for like, I don't know, like 88 cents or something at Martin's, which is this local discount shop a few years ago, and I just like grabbed tons of them. But because I did that, I can use these without worrying that I am wasting, and I think that for me it helps me use my supplies. So I have a kind of spring green, magenta, and turquoise wire here, and I'm just going to start feeding it through these holes. Really, you can go however you like. I like to twist the ends of the starts of them together so that they'll feed through much easier, and I like to kind of make them just very random, and I like the wires to come apart in places and stack up in places. I just think it's really pretty and really random. So, you know, you can just keep weaving these through your eyelets until you're happy with the results. After kind of whip stitching around the sides, I'm going to go back stitch down through the holes so I get lines connecting them, just because I like that little glint that the wire gives it, and I think it's kind of pretty. Now these wires can be kind of pokey, so just be careful when you're doing that you don't like stab yourself in the fingers and make yourself bleed. Now wire is really easy to work with because like you don't need to thread a needle or anything because it's already sharp, as I mentioned earlier. But the other cool thing is that you can actually put beads on if you have any little beads you want to showcase. Those are really fun to add, and sometimes you can actually get multiple beads, multiple wires through one bead if you want. I'm just going to put a couple here on this card because I'm very clumsy when it comes to beading things and trying to keep it in front of the camera, as you can see. So I'm just going to put on like 3 beads, and you can do as much as you want, but that's about all I can stand to put you through here. Good grief. There we go. Huh. That was hard to watch. And now we'll go back through this one. So you can like pass these little wires through several times. And I'm just trying to basically make sure I connect all of the little dots here. Try not to kink your wires as you go. That can happen pretty easily. And you can trim the ends if you need to so they're all the same length, so it's just a little easier to feed them through if you need to while you go. So I'm just going to have those little beads on there, and I'm going to continue stitching through those holes until I have wire going between each of these eyelets. Once you're done, just grab your starting and ending wire and just twist them together on the back to secure them. And just press them down. And I'm going to use some hot glue to attach them to my card base. And I like hot glue anytime I'm using like a really, you know, kind of mixed media technique, because it's just going to marry those different layers really well together. The cardboard that could be a little like buckly from all the water we used, and also the wires. That hot glue just really grabs and dries so quickly. And I'm just going to center it up on a white card base here. Just make sure you have it in, like, you can kind of adjust it for a second before the glue sets. Then once you get it where you want it, then you can hold it in place. And if you need to compress your wires at all, you can either do that now or after the glue sets. And it doesn't take very long. Now I have this, I was testing out the techniques on scraps of the scrapbook paper before I began recording. That way I would kind of know what to expect. And I noticed that the I Love Yous on that paper would be perfect embellishment. So I just kind of bent it so it would be like a banner and have some texture. And then I put foam dots on the parts that I wanted to be raised, and then I'm just going to press that right there, and it matches, but it also stands out really well, and I think it looks really pretty. Let's take a look at the other ones. Now this one I did wire without any beads, and it still I think looks really pretty and elegant. And this one I did beads between every pass. I did my wires, I put my wires on their own. I used like a violet and a gold, and I put the beads on just like a single strand, so it would be a little bit easier to thread. But you can see 3 different results here that I think look really fantastic. And there you have it, 3 fun cards using up some supplies that can be kind of tricky to deal with. I mean, I never really cared for pattern paper that was just white background with like a pattern on it. Sometimes sheet music paper or just book pages would be really cool, but oftentimes you just get these patterns that you really don't know what to do with because they don't have that blast of color that you might want. And this is a great way to deal with that. Plus, we got to use up some stuff from our recycling bin, and I'm just going to show you my wire buying problem here that I had. Look at this. So clearly I don't have to worry about my wire being too precious or being afraid to use it because I have plenty. And you know, that's what I have to say that I used to enjoy about buying things in bulk, is that it never felt too precious to use. So go dig through your stash. I bet you got some stuff that you might have bought in bulk in the past, and this is a fun way to make it useful again, using recyclable materials. They're not precious. You don't have to worry about wasting them, and then you can let your creativity soar. I want to thank you so much for watching today, and if you want the stamps that I use today, you can find them at Rubber Stamp Tapestry. Go online to pegstamps.com and make sure you check out the coupon code in the video description so you can save a little more money. Plus, I will link up the stamps that I used as well. Thanks so much for watching. Give me a thumbs up if you liked it, and until next time, happy crafting.